If you are a participant you need to be in the speaker room over there. And this is the scaling. See, I got it this time now. It's Scaling a Smart Kitchen Startup. And that's going to be moderated by Kahn. So Greg, is he right there? Is he over there? There he is. Please welcome our next panel to the stage.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's us in the startup competition, and then beer and wine. So we'll make this entertaining. Thanks for joining us today. We have two terrific panelists to talk about scaling up a hardware business and the impact of retail. So you've met Steve Svajian and Mike Wallace of Perfect Company are joining me today, and both Steve and Mike have very different perspectives on retail and how they brought their businesses to life. So we're going to do this as a fireside chat. We'll start with Mike and then Steve. And Mike, you have a really interesting background in this space. Grew up in the toy business, and
I did.
Yeah, if you would say grow up in the toy business.
Grow up in the toy business.
And you've obviously learned a lot about retail from the space that you were in. So tell this group a little bit about some of the lessons that you learned about how to scale a business and the importance of retailers at the outset of the creation of a product.
Yeah, sure. And the best way I think to illustrate that is how we got started with our current company. So my background is I've been a toy inventor most of my career. The last 10 years, our toys have done about $500 million at retail. We've worked with every major toy company on the planet, really. And then I guess January 2013, Darren and I are sitting in a bar in Hong Kong drinking lychee martinis, and we're sitting there going, you know, we should do our own product. We should try taking our own product to market instead of licensing it to a toy company. What should we do? Well, we never could make a good lychee martini at home, and we'd been playing around for a few years before in toy stuff with measuring stuff and recipes, and we came up with this idea, what if we could make a cocktail? What if we had a digital scale and an app and it told us what to do, and we could make our own cocktails? Well, we called the guys back in our office in Vancouver, Washington, and 2 weeks later, they had hacked a kitchen scale. We had written a demo app with 8 recipes. We cold called Brookstone. Darren flew out, walked into their offices with a box of booze, and an hour later walked out with an order for 50,000 units. And sort of the part of the story that I think is most important there is that we didn't spend a lot of money and time until we knew we were going to have some traction and have some interest at retail. And then it was a horse race. We had 6 months to do our product and launch it. It launched middle of November in Brookstone and did incredibly well. They sold 30,000 units in 6 weeks, one of their best launches ever. The following year, they sold almost 3 times as many just based on word of mouth. If you look at the data every weekend, people are together drinking, and we kind of have this drinking Tupperware party going on. And it's very social. So that's how we got started.
So the lesson learned for everybody here today is drinking product and Brookstone is the combination to scale.
Actually, the connected bar has not been mentioned much in this summit, but it's time. It deserves a spot.
It's a perfect segue to the evening. You know, we in the preparation for this fireside, Mike, you talked a lot about pricing, and we haven't had that much of a discussion today about the pricing of product and how that helps you scale. And you had some really interesting perspective on whether to price it at a premium or whether to be at an entry point, and perhaps share with this group about how you think about that at Perfect Company.
Yeah, sure. As our experience over the years is that pricing is incredibly important if you want to have a lot of traction at retail. Just in the toy business, if you could cut the price of a product in half, you can sell 4 to 8 times as many units a lot of the time. So cutting price and hitting a price is incredibly important. And for us, launching this product, being under $50 is gift category for mass retail. Very important to hit that for our product to really scale and get a lot of users. And that's been an incredibly successful strategy for us. So, and then we've been growing the line, obviously, as we go into retail. So the last 2 years were really about figuring out the product, working with Brookstone. We launched our bake product as well. And then this year has really been about expanding retail. And that's been it's taken all year. And to really do that effectively, we had to create a line. We couldn't just sell one product at one price. So we launched a $99 high-end scale, which is the best consumer scale you can buy on the market right now. We're replacing our $50 item with a Bluetooth scale. And all these come in gift sets. So the problem is that we're selling a scale, and you have to have a value proposition to the consumer on the shelf. It can't be a little scale, because everybody's seen those, and what's special about that? So we put it in a box with a lot of stuff. It comes with a stainless steel shaker, it comes with a device stand. With Bake, we have bowls, we have an oven thermometer, and so you get what it's for, and you feel like it has a lot of value. And then the other big thing we're doing this year is we've created what we call our starter scale, because we've seen data where when people have this experience, whether it's making cocktails or baking or something else, they really like the workflow. They like the experience of cooking or making drinks this way. And once they get into that experience, they want to trade up. In fact, most of our high-end scales are being sold to our current users, which is fantastic. So we actually have a scale that costs the price of a latte to make in China, and it's a connected scale, and it works great. It's a fantastic scale. And so we have a partnership. Our first big partnership is Pernod Ricard. They're going to be actually starting to bundle it with value-added packs at retail with bottles, because one of their biggest problems is people buy their product, take it home, and don't know what to make with it. So, to have this really inexpensive scale that allows them to interactively make drinks is fantastic. And then we're doing the same thing on the bake side. We're actually starting our own launched our own television commercial this week on national television, and it's going to be selling the bake scale with bowls for $19.99. And that's to help drive retail as well as awareness of the product, because when you're new, like we are, it's very hard to get your story out.
So Mike, you had a ton of knowledge about there's two retail cycles, as you were telling me. There's the cycle of selling into the retailers themselves, and then there's, of course, the retail that we all know today, coming up on the holiday season. How do they differ? And talk a little bit about, as you think about scaling, and you spoke about different SKUs that you have to develop for different retailers, how do you balance that with consumer need? So how do you know all of the retailers have their specifications, they want to be different from another retailer, but how do you balance that with what the consumer actually wants?
Well, and the consumers actually sort of line up to different retailers. And so you have different price points you have to set for different retailers to reach their market. So Bed Bath & Beyond is more mass. Best Buy, Target, that's a $50 product is a great product for them. A Sur La Table or Williams-Sonoma, a $99 product is way more appropriate for them and much more interesting to their customers. And so it's really about just lining up with retail at different parts. We're also in Sam's Club. We have a $35 to $39 product that's in Sam's Club and in BJ's and Barnes & Noble, and that's for a whole nother sort of set of consumers. And you see this a lot with a lot of products, but there are cycles. It's a cycle we're trying to make last most of the year, but because we started in Brookstone is primarily a fourth quarter retailer. I mean, they have a little blip on Father's Day, but they're pretty much flatline until December. And so all of our sales have been fourth quarter, and sort of the process is you're selling into retail originally for the year, but the following year, and so that's a process. Telling them about your new products, what you're gonna do on the shelves, trying to explain all your features, and then once you're shipping product, you have to change modes because you want to sell through. You want those retailers to sell that product, and that's a whole nother animal. And that's the thing we're really been adjusting. That's why we actually raised money this year, so we could do a better job of marketing our products. And so that's really the cycles of retail.
And from a manufacturing standpoint, you mentioned there's that sell-in period, right, where you're trying to forecast for the year, and then you have this mad dash. Brookstone is known for having a lot of pop-up stores before the holiday season, in addition to their kind of cornerstone outlets. How do you think about manufacturing, or how do you space out kind of the demand throughout the year, knowing that there's a big rush at the end of the year, but then perhaps there's slower periods in the other three quarters?
Yeah. Well, part of it is history. And so a lot of the retailers will have history next year, but we don't have a lot of history this year. And so it's best to be conservative. You don't want to sell too much into retail. You can kill a product. I can't tell you how many toys we thought would just make an amazing amount of money for years, and the toy company got greedy and shipped too much product. And there was a glut of product at the end of the year, had to go on closeout, and retailers don't want the line. So it's very important to be very careful and judicious. A lot of the orders we get, we always trim back. We want to make sure everything sells through.
And any lessons from e-tailers versus brick and mortar stores, and how do you think about that as you determine your strategies? And clearly there's been a digital migration. We're going to turn to Steve in a second. It was a very different point of view on the retail environment, but just your perspective today in 2015 heading to the holiday season. There's been more of a shift towards digital purchase clearly, but brick and mortar locations are still very important to your business.
Well, they are, but I think a lot of our retails are probably selling at least half of our product online as well. I mean, and so they're moving serious numbers. I know half the product Brookstone sold last year probably was through online. So it's definitely a growing segment. We're starting to work with more online retailers. We're getting set up. We're going to sell on Amazon more directly. It's definitely something we're learning. It's not our expertise. We're more from traditional retail and manufacturing. So I'm definitely going to talk to this guy and learn a lot more about what he does.
All right, we're going to turn to this guy. Thanks, Mike. And then at the end, we'll circle back and ask if we'll maybe have a little bit of a boxing match here between how you guys have scaled up. Steve, you had a very, very different approach to retail, which you mentioned in the pre-calls that you actually ignored retailers for the first couple of years, which is a lesson I don't think anyone would be thinking they'd be coming into this session with. So tell a little bit about that. Why did you?
I call the strategy "avoid it like the plague." That's the official name internally.
Avoid it like the plague. So
yeah,
why?
Avoid retail like the, well, that was right for us. I mean, and I think it depends on the type of company that you're building and the type of brand you're building, right? And at the end of the day, I think it depends on who the customer is. So, Mike is a totally different customer than we have, I'm sure. Our customers hang out on Reddit. They hang out in different forums, and so we knew we could get to them and kind of let them help us kind of build the brand. We knew we could learn quite a bit about the product, and then retail's hard. It's hard. I've been through the process before, and so we wanted to learn quite a bit, and we wanted to approach it very slowly, and we wanted to build kind of a community of supporters before we took that plunge.
And we spoke a lot about the consumer. You mentioned in your lunchtime speech the consumer is critically important to you. So talk a little bit about, you mentioned not getting caught up in trendy things. We're in an environment now where there's a new product launched all the time. Yeah. You took a very different approach, and you mentioned that it's really important to make trade-offs early and decisions pretty quickly based on that consumer feedback that you're getting. And you also mentioned, Steve, that everything is not going to be perfect at the outset, but talk to this group here that's developing hardware. What does that mean? What if it's not perfect? Where do you draw that line?
Yeah, so that's a good question, because I think it's, there's this concept of the MVP, right? And I think it's sort of a harmful concept, the minimum viable product, right? And I think the tendency is to develop minimal products instead of viable products. We look at it so what's the cupcake? Is what we call it internally. It's what's that small product that's going to delight, and it's about putting sort of super important features that are part of that delightful experience above the line on the board and everything else below the line, and being really rigorous about doing that, cutting out extraneous features. So, but yeah, you want to live up to your values and to the expectations that the community has first and foremost, and I think that's part of building the brand. So
you started very small. You targeted a small group of individuals initially with the product. Then you delivered the product to the community, and you grew that community organically. So talk to me now about the retail strategy. Where did you go from there?
Yeah, so the retail strategy is really to augment what our primary strategy still is, which is direct. I don't know. I think it's a different world. I really do. I think I have to be careful because there are a bunch of retailers in the room. But we, I mean, look, we literally say it's true. We see people cooking together on Reddit, right, and talking to each other, and then we get traffic from Reddit, right? And that's such a powerful, huge community. And it's if you look at the traffic that you can get online and the education that you can do online, versus foot traffic. There's such an uptick every year in online traffic that it's sort of eclipsing in importance the sort of the retail strategy, at least for somebody early stage, right? It's like I think you have to push into channel. Like channel probably to get to a certain revenue milestone, channel needs to be 30-40% of sales or so to hit that next big milestone.
Is there a threshold, a unit threshold that this is both to Steve and Mike that you think about as you're developing your products? Clearly you have your projections, but in your mind today, is there a number that you feel like is an important number either to get into brick and mortar retailers or to for yourself to think about as you're building your online strategy?
Do you mean like unit shipped? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, certainly, well, we pay attention I think Michael said the same thing. We really hit it off last night. We talked, and it was two totally different sides of the coin, but many of the same sort of underlying principles, which is kind of weird. We pay attention to those milestones because they're indicative of success, and it's good to celebrate them. But like on an ongoing sort of operational basis, we pay attention to the number of people that are cooking, right? So it's about usage, and usage drives unit volume. If we know that the product is useful, we know that word of mouth is going to, sort of spread the product as well. So operationally, we look at that. I mean, I think, yeah, like we'd love to get to the million unit mark, sometime. I don't know if that's, but yeah. So that's a big milestone, sure.
No, it's true. I mean, it's in the end we do think about users. And our business is about getting as many users as we can. That drives our business because we're really a software company long term. Yeah, we think about it. I mean, we've been very lucky. We're shipping a few 100,000 units this year. We should be on track to hit 1 million users sometime next year, which would be fantastic. But that's and so retail and all this other stuff is sort of a means to an end. It's really getting, like you say, it's that community, those people using those products, and it's that word of mouth, and those people talking to their friends and buying their friends, those gifts when it comes time for birthdays or for Christmas. That's really, you want a critical mass, and it's hard to know what that is.
We live in a Shark Tank here today. I have a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old, and they're already poking at the TV saying they only sold that amount of units. Forget it. That's not a real business. And now with Indiegogo and Kickstarter, it's a much more transparent environment where even a privately funded company, you sort of know where it stands in the marketplace at a very early stage. Just any thoughts from you about the Indiegogo and Kickstarter, and whether you think that that's an effective mechanism to building a hardware company?
I want to back up to your 9-year-old talking about unit sales. Like that's pretty amazing.
Alexa, if you're watching.
But yeah, I mean, I think I think it's important that you're genuine, right? If transparency is one of your values, and I think it's been one of our values, it's great. But it doesn't mean that we tell everything. It's like some things are TMI, right? But I think in particular, like communities, and I mentioned Reddit before, but in Reddit, Twitter, Facebook, I think in Reddit in particular, and some of the more sort of niche community forums, you have to be super genuine. Right, I was talking to Kenji about this last night. They quickly smell a rat, and they will boot you out, and you'll totally lose all your credibility. And so, building a brand is kind of like knowing, some of those communities really inside and out, and being at the end of the day, super genuine about it.
Mike?
So the question was about Indiegogo?
Indiegogo and Kickstarter, and thinking about scaling a business and whether you feel it's an effective strategy. It certainly is a strategy.
It can be a great strategy for launching a product and getting exposure. There's no question. That's how you guys started, right? Did you start with Kickstarter?
No, we had an existing
after that.
Kickstarter played a different role in our business, and it's one, I think our time's running up, so I think it's a bit complicated, but
yeah.
I mean, I think it's to get back to your point. Part of your question was about transparency, right? And the numbers, and sort of that trade-off between being transparent and using them to, using that as a platform to scale. I think for us, we did have financial support. So the big payoff for us was that feedback and the ability to learn and community, right? Like we had an existing community, but we definitely added that community with Kickstarter. And I think it's pretty unique if you have a brand where sort of like the community can help you build that brand. It's like you kind of have your own values, which resonates with the community's values, and that all of that goes into building a brand. And I think that those communities exist within Kickstarter and Indiegogo and Spades, and so it's really nice to be able to tap into that.
So before we kick into happy hour, startup competition, one lesson for the crowd, just a tweetable lesson from each of you guys. We'll start with Steve. What do you want this audience to walk away with?
I think I have a lot of respect for what Mike has done. It's interesting that the numbers are very similar, totally different approaches. I think you have to know yourself and know your customer, know your own strengths and know your customer, and play to your strengths and show up where your customer is going to be.
Yeah, and I would say, I think in the end it's about value and price. That's the proposition.
Yeah.
If you don't have that formula, almost nothing else matters.
Know your customer, value and price equation. Want to leave it up to the audience if there are any questions before we close? Yeah.
So given that you're in a business of connected devices rather than a packaged good that you then have a relationship with the customer after the fact, you're talking about building brands. How do you stoke the fires of customer loyalty after they purchase your product and sustain a relationship with them?
Yeah, so for us, oh yeah, we should do that, right?
So the question is, we're talking about connected devices today, and so how do you maintain that loyalty with a brand with a customer rather, as you're building your brand?
Yeah, well, there's two things. I mean, obviously we get novels written by our customers telling us in excruciating detail what kind of features they want to see. And you try to implement some of that going forward. But I think the thing that really drives engagement and loyalty for us long term is content. So they're buying our product to be able to make things, whether it's cocktails or bake or whatever else. And in the long term, having enough quality content, enough other content partners is really what keeps those people there. That's absolutely our number one job next year.
We probably have time for one more question if there's another. Okay, we talk about cocktails. I think we're ready. Huge thanks to Steve and Mike for joining us today, and you as well.